Hey y'all, Big Tim here again. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Old School and Bass with Big Tim. As promised, today we're going to talk about spinning equipment or spinning setups. Like I said, this is my old Creek reel. I've had this for 20 plus years, so I'm not a fan of the triggers anymore. Although it's still very familiar to fit in my finger, in my hand. Trust me. Um, but this is a 2000 series reel. And you'll see that the reels they start out generally the smallest one I've ever seen is a 5,000 or a 500 series reel. That's a little tiny little dude, better suited for 2 pound test line for trout and crappie stuff like that. But you'll start at a 500, go up to 1,000, 2,000, 2,500, 3,000, all the way up to sevens, eights, and nines. 7, 8, 9,000 when I say that. The 7, 8, 9,000 reels are for saltwater applications or catfish, big stuff. For us around here, probably the most popular size reel that we sell at the store is a 2,500 series reel. Different manufacturers will call it a 20 or a 200 or something along those lines, but 2,500 is generally one you want to look at. Shimano, I think, calls it 2,500. Pflueger calls it, I think, a 20. And I think Abu Garcia does it by 20s as well. Then some other company, I can't remember who it is, calls them 200s. But that is generally the best, not the best, but the most sold, most popular around this area because you can use it for bass fishing and bluegill fishing. That reel is going to be better suited for right around 8 pound line. Most of your reels, I can't think of a reel on the market that doesn't do this, but somewhere on the spool, around the perimeter of the spool, they'll have a series of numbers. And they're going to have 3 different pairs of numbers. The first pair of numbers is going to tell you the lightest line you can use and then how many yards of that light line. And then, of course, on the opposite end, it's going to be the heaviest line you can use and how many yards you can put on there. I always recommend using the middle number. You're going to use less line, but have a better cast. If you needed to go to a heavier line, you could, but you're not going to cast it quite as well as you would with the middle number. The lighter the line, the better the cast. So like this little guy right here is recommended for 4, 6, and 8 pound. Now, if I put 8 pound on there, it's going to give me a little bit more strength. I'm going to use less line, but I'm not going to cast as far as I would with 6 pound. Okay. And sometimes that can be important, especially if you're using a really light setup. Your lure, is really light. So this, like I said, the ones we're showing today are old reels that I haven't used in quite a while. But one of the differences, this is a 2000 reel that has a rear drag. These rear drag reels are getting pretty hard to find these days, but they are pretty nice in the fact that when you're fighting a fish, you can adjust your drag without getting it up in the way of your line. Because like this one, which is a 4000 series reel, spooled up with braid, the drag is right here, and you wind this. So you can see if you're fighting a fish, your hand is up in the way of the line as you're fighting a fish, and sometimes that can be a problem. Like if you're a guy like me and you're married, sometimes your wedding ring can get caught in that line. It may cause you a problem. Like with me, it did have an issue with me one time. It hit the line and kind of snagged it, but it sprung right off. But what it did was almost make like a banjo type thing, and it gave fish enough just to get off. He was able to get loose on me. So you want to make sure that you check your drag on a regular basis. I generally check my drag every cast, every other cast on a serious tournament or whatever. And you want to pull your line out to make sure that it's not too loose, but not too tight. Because if it's too loose and you're constantly doing this as you're reeling in fish, you're putting in more line twist. And more line twist is more aggravation. More line twist means more tangles, and you're just not going to be happy. That's probably why I gave up on spinning reels years ago, was because of line twist. There's several ways that you get line twist in. We talked about the other day how if you close the bail by winding it, like this. If you close the bail by winding it like that, they say, the studies have showed that that'll cause 60% more line twist. Okay, that's one thing. Another thing is putting too heavy of line on. If you don't go by those guidelines that we talked about on the spool, you'll cause yourself more line twist. And of course, having your drag too loose will cause more line twist. But the reason we have spinning setups is basically for light line applications and light lure applications. We talked about starting out. You might use Roadrunners or Beetle Spins or Rooster Tails or something like that. But like this past weekend, we just had the Elite Series tournament on Lake Lanier, and most of those guys were throwing spinning setups because they're using light line looking for spotted bass in really clear water. In clear water, you want to use a light line. Some of the guys were using braid, but a lot of them were using fluorocarbon directly. I'm not a fan of fluorocarbon directly to the reel because it does cause more line twist, but those guys are doing it professionally, or the guys that are real masters with spinning equipment, they generally tend to change their line a little bit more often. Those Elite Series guys, heck, they'll change their line every day. Guys like us that are working and paying for their line, not so much. We're gonna not change it every day. But some of the guys that I know locally that are, spinning gear masters, they do change their line regularly too. But you can use braid with a leader. I like using a blood knot for mine. One of the pros that I talked to one time, I think it was Jeremy Starks years ago, he talked about how he didn't want his blood knot to go past the first guide when he reeled it up because it would catch when he was trying to make a cast. I never really had that problem, but then again, maybe he wasn't using the knot I am. I use a blood knot when I tie a leader to fluorocarbon because I actually like my leader to go up into the reel. If I get a big fish next to the side of the boat and I'm using spinning equipment, like I said, I'm not the greatest with it, so I need to make sure that I've got as much out there as I can, and I don't want to have to take a chance of my knot hitting something on the side of the boat or something like that. So I try to generally have my knot up in the reel. Now sometimes I only have 2 or 3 feet, in which case I generally don't worry about it. That's some of those muddy water situations. But I think that's it in a nutshell for spinning equipment. There's probably something else that I'd forgotten to cover, but we'll talk more and more on the water about it, and we'll pick up some tidbits here and there. Now, that being said, hopefully the weather breaks soon. It's too cold to get my old butt out there right now. I can't handle the cold weather. I always said I'm the only fat guy in the world that doesn't like the cold. I like it hot. Put me in a pair of shorts, put me on the water, I am fine. But as far as being out there in the cold, not so much. So we're going to start dropping some bombs here shortly. We're going to have on the water video. One thing I wanted to say is right now, as of today, we have 46 subscribers on Old School and Bass. So thanks to each and every one of you. Once we get to 60, we're going to start dropping some bombs, different techniques. I know this stuff has been more elementary, and some of the guys are looking for some more advanced content, and it is coming. Pretty much, if I know it, I'll say it. I might have to keep a couple of things secret because a couple guys that have taught me, maybe I owe that to them. But at the same time, I think those guys would be happy that they're helping other people out. That's kind of my goal here. I want to help, some younger guys, younger girls, maybe retirees that just don't get to fish very often, just starting to go fishing. So that's the whole purpose of this. But we will get more advanced very, very shortly. So thanks for tuning in, and until the next time, have fun and good luck.